Oh, hi there. Welcome back to the Educated Columnist Snap channel. How you doing? So today we're going to be talking about Legion. Is Legion overhyped? Do I think you should buy it? Do I think you should get it through the Spotlight Cash? And we're also going to go talk about some extra things that have been happening in the game. So let's get right to it as we usually do. Da, 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 da. So first thing I do want to talk about is that there was a July survey. So if you are playing on mobile, PC doesn't have this link, and I haven't seen an official link for the survey through PC. So I don't know if that's available. But for mobile, they do have a link, July survey. It's a pretty in-depth survey, so you might take some time, but it does address a lot of, I would say, concerns that the player base does have. So they do seem pretty in tune with some of the complaints that the community has as a whole. So if you do care about the game, you do want to give them some feedback, this is definitely a great opportunity to do that. Make sure you are being respectful. That's something that goes through, right? Because people do read this, and if you're just being aggressive, they kind of just skip the whole thing, right? So you don't get your message across, they don't get the sentiment. So as long as you are being careful with your words, then you can definitely let them know what you think about some of the changes. Now, I did this last time as well, but I just wanted to mention some topics to consider. I do think they did a good job with a lot of the things that they put in there, but there are also some things, right, that you do have free response. So these are some of the things you might want to be thinking about in your free response section. Maybe these will jog some of your memories. I'm not going to go through each of them one by one. There's too many. I do love a draft arena sealed mode. You know, if you want to fight for me here, definitely do that. But there's definitely a lot of things to consider if you want to let them know some of the feedback there. Next thing as well is the Conquerors event. So there's a new community event. First, second dinner, you get to choose your Conqueror, one of 20 players, and then we have Cozy and Snap Dexter also hosting. So that's pretty cool. Make sure you do that. You can get 250 credits, and you can get a Spectrum variant. So free credits if you want. Just pick somebody. There's a lot of cool people in there that I recommend. I'm not gonna give any suggestions. I think they're all great choices, but it's something to do. So feel free to do that if you like. And now let's go into Legion itself, right? So Legion, of course, is a 5 energy, 8 power card with the on reveal. This should say on reveal. With the on reveal, replace each other location with this one. So it's a pretty powerful card in terms of what it can do to the game. As long as the locations are good, Legion can be really good. I also think the 8 power base is really, really good. Right under Shang-Chi, but very good stats for its cost with an impactful ability. So, um, kind of interesting. A lot of people rated this card when it had 7 power, which I will say mattered, right? Like it being 7 power, it being 8 power is a meaningful difference. And a lot of people weren't super excited about it. And also the Storm Legion interaction was assumed not to work. So there were some assumptions being made that turned out not to be how it is on release and does change the power of this card. So overall, in terms of whether I think you should buy this card, you should get this card. I do think it's worth 3,000 tokens. So I would say that if you have 3,000 tokens and you want to play this card, you're really wondering, oh, is it worth my tokens here? New cards coming out for 3,000 tokens is pretty good deal generally because they're due to Spotlight, they're kind of the same rate, so they don't have any intrinsic benefits. Like you're not likely to get a Series 4 in a Spotlight compared to a Series 5. They're the same rates, but you are getting half cost off when you use it for tokens. So tokens do get kind of a value here. I will say it's worth the 3,000 tokens if you want to use your tokens. I will say it's not worth the solo spotlight. So let's say you already have High Evolutionary, you already have Darkhawk. Do I think you should open 3, 4 spotlights to get Legion? No, I don't think it's worth that at all. Now, if you're missing Darkhawk or High Evolutionary and you want to play with those cards, now I would say maybe that might be worth to get both High Evolutionary and Legion. That actually might be pretty impactful. But as a solo spotlight, if it's the only thing new that you're getting, it's not worth it, I would say, pretty much. I also say it's not core in that it's a card you don't really need to win. It's not something that's really going to change your win percentages. It's not dominating the meta. It has decent numbers, but it's not like the best deck in the game or anything like that. A lot of times when new cards come out, they're very hyped. They show in the stats, right? They'll be very dominant in the stats, at least initially. And all new cards that are played somewhat always start off dominating because there's not enough players. So the people that are playtesting are the people that have a lot of tokens, so they're longtime players with good understanding of the meta, or they're streamers with good understanding of the meta. So they just do well. But as more people play, it averages out and it stops looking that good for the new card. So that's the same thing with Legion. Initial stats were looking very impressive, but as more people are playing it, it goes back to the mean. It goes more to an average stat line, and it's not dominating. But I will say the stats are good. The stats are promising, but it just means that it's a good card. It's not a crazy card. It's not core. You don't need it. If you're having fun playing a different deck, don't change it up because people are overhyping it. It's definitely overhyped, but it's not a bad card. So there are some reasons for the hype, and it's definitely better than what people were expecting. I will say that's true. People were expecting this to be, one of the worst cards this season. Maybe it's not even close to that. So that's my thoughts. You can spend the tokens if that's holding you back, but I would not spend Spotlight Caches on this. Now, in terms of Storm plus Legion, right, this has to be talked about because this is a premium combo that people are using that definitely pushes Legion up a bit in power. So if you play Storm on 4 and you follow up with Legion, well, Legion will take that flooded location, put it on all 3, and you can't play anywhere else. So that's something to be aware of. There's something also I did forget to mention. If you are buying Legion for 3,000 tokens, you should probably have Jeff. I do need to mention that, right? Legion, if you want to play the Storm Legion deck list, right, you need Jeff. So if you don't have Jeff, this loses a lot of that appeal because that deck list isn't as premium, isn't as efficient if you don't have Jeff. So if you're thinking, oh, I want to get this card to play the Storm deck, but I don't have Jeff, well, you can still get the card, but it's not going to shine as well as if you did have Jeff. So that might be an extra 6,000 tokens that you don't want to spend. So just keep that in mind if you are thinking about getting this particular card. But in terms of the Storm plus Legion, it can feel toxic, but it is within the rules of the game. What people have been doing recently is just, well, this has always been part of the meta where people do all their combos on turn 6. Everything goes down turn 6. That's where they play their broken cards. And this type of deck list kind of encourages you to have tempo, encourages you to be stronger earlier in the game. I will say that turn 6 lockdown does benefit this deck because they're playing things like Sunspot, they're playing things like Nebula. So they do get a higher benefit than you. But if you are playing a tempo-based deck, you can definitely compete with this type of deck list, right? You just have to win 2 lanes, and usually they can't play anything except for Jeff and as well. So it's not guaranteed that they can just win the tempo out with this. So just keep that in mind. It might feel toxic, and it could be toxic. It honestly, I would say, depends on how the community as a whole feels about this combo. If there's just a lot of negative sentiment, maybe Secondary will just change it because the amount of negative sentiment is too much. But the decklist has to be popular enough that it impacts like the casual player. And right now, right? Since the new card, I wouldn't say it's at that level, but as you know, the cards get more popular, and it does have a lower token breakpoint for people to jump in, so it might see more play over time. But currently, it seems fine. Don't know if it's going to get changed. It could, depending on how second dinner and the community feels. But right now, it's just kind of a way to punish the super greed late game decks that don't have any tempo in the early to mid game. So that's kind of my thoughts on that. I will say something interesting about this is it's likely the best card of the season. So that is something I think no one was really expecting. A lot of people were super hyped for Jean Grey. A lot of people were kind of hyped for Echo. Mirage didn't really have that much hype, but there was definitely some thoughts about it. But there was a lot of people that are like, oh, maybe this is going to be like the next Snow Guard, right? It's another location character. Maybe it's not going to feel impactful. But I will say, uh, it's always good to wait till cards come out to fully analyze. I did have my suggestions. I didn't think it was going to be that crazy, but I did analyze it when it had 7 power base. And I do think that matters a lot. The 8 power buff helps. It makes it feel really strong in as a 5 drop where you play it for 8 power, and that's very reasonable. So I do think that did matter, but it's just a record. Like, it just reminds me that yeah, you always have to wait till the card comes out before you analyze, right? Um, we also didn't think it was going to work with Storm, so that was another thing that maybe made it harder to analyze, right? We were assuming that oh, it's gonna work like that other location where when it hits flooded, you get an extra turn, so it doesn't work, right? So that there were some things that made it likely to be analyzed incorrectly. So those things do have to wait, but it's kind of interesting that this did shine ends up being most likely the best card. We still haven't seen Mirage yet, so there's still that to wait for, but I find it unlikely it trumps the stats of this card right now. So that's just something cool. Overall, I do think you could get this. I wouldn't get it through Spotlight, but I would if you want to play with this card, right? If you find this card fun or frustrating or whatever you want to play with it, I think 3,000 tokens is fine. Wouldn't use the Spotlight at all. Now, I do have some deck lists as well. At the end, just some things that people have been playing that I think you could definitely run. So additional one is the She-Hulk Legion. So this one doesn't run Storm. It's just using Legion as a secondary 5 drop. You run Kang here as well. You don't need Kang, but Kang is a fun card to play in case people want to mess with you. You do get to snap and use Kang here since you're not really super reliant on playing a ton of your cards, so it's not that important. But you do have the early game with the armor, Sunspot Nebula, that kind of thing. So you can contest the other Legion players since you're also playing Sunspot Nebula. And then if they don't do that kind of thing, or you go Cosmo into their Legion, you can just She-Hulk Infinite on 6, just like the others. So it's a nice little Legion deck with some tools. If you don't have Kang, you can play something else, right? You could play Storm if you want, right, instead of Kang. But this was just a deck list that I thought was pretty cool. Makes a lot of sense. Now, next up, we do have the Storm version. So this one is also running High Evolutionary, right? So that might be a little bit difficult if you don't have High Evolutionary. Fortunately, High Evolutionary is in this Spotlight cache, so you could probably get both at the same time. So that would be pretty cool. But here is just like a classic Storm Legion annoyance. You're full locked in on doing this turn 5 lockdown. There's no really other secondary plan, but you do have the Chavez for consistency, and you do have the Jeff, and then you just have the high evolutionary cards. So you're kind of very focused on winning the game through going Storm into Legion. But if you do that, there's no real counterplay. Now, this isn't a really good deck at gaining lots of Qs because that turn 6, everyone knows who's winning that game. So there's that weakness in terms of climbing ranked, but Conquest, this is actually a pretty good game mode or a pretty good deck for Conquest. So that's something interesting about Legion stats. Its ranked mode is worse than its Conquest mode. And that's pretty unusual. I would say most decks do better in rank than they do in conquest, but it does mean that this type of deck, right? Once you win, it's hard to lose willingly. Like if you get your combo off, you kind of get the cubes, right? And you just have to consistently do that. And if you do that, you can win your conquest. Where in ranked, even if you win, you're not getting that many cubes, so it's hard to climb. And if you're losing, it's a little bit rough. So kind of interesting that this type of deck list, this type of card does better in conquest. Next up, we do have Dara's Legion deck. So this is from Dara GJ or DJD, where he's running Silk and Lizard, trying to go heavy tempo in the early game, and then you lock it down with your Storm Legion. So it's just much more heavy in the tempo. And then if you are playing it normally, where you're going Storm on 3, then you can just do Dr. Doom and Silk to win that Storm lane, even if people are contesting that lane. So it's just a pretty interesting deck. The Ebony Maw is a really a very telegraphed aggressive card to play here, but you do have the Jeff, so you can play your Jeff in the Ebony Maw lane anyways. And if you are protecting it with a Sunspot or a Nebula, then it can pretty much win that lane by itself. So pretty cool list. It can work. It does have some weaknesses, but something you can try. And then the next one, I believe the last one I have, is a Darkhawk Legion deck. So instead of running Dino, you're running Legion instead. Just because Legion does seem to perform pretty well just as a regular card to play in your deck. It actually has a lot of flexibility just because the stat line's really good. So you can just play it in a lot of decks. And with this particular deck, you're running this Luke Cage, which I think helps you in a lot of matchups, right? You can't really things like negative zones or any location that removes power. You can just drop this Legion in there and hit all the lanes, and then this Luke Cage will just protect you. So it just opens up even more locations for Legion to be very powerful, and I think that's a really cool addition for the combo. And then you just have the Killmonger and everything just to deal with the other people that are playing Sunspots and Nebulas that a lot of people are doing right now. So it just seems like a good deck to play into the current matchup. So this is something you can run if you wanna kind of play anti-meta but still have that Legion in your deck yourself. So overall, Legion a little bit overhyped, but its stats are decent. Not broken, but decent. And I wouldn't get it through spotlights, but I would be okay with you getting it with 3,000 tokens. So that's my thoughts. Make sure to do the survey if you want to provide feedback, and if you want the free credits and maybe the chance on the variant, vote for someone in the Conquerors Event. So that's all I got for you guys today. You might need the you might need this. Oh wait, let me turn that off. You might need this if you want to look at it one more time. Well, all in all, take care of yourselves. Peace out. That kind of thing.
Educated Colin Snap. Once you watch him, you won't go back. He'll teach you to marvel snap. Your skills will be improving. How you doing? You'll hit infinity and won't go back. Educated Colin Snap.